A pleasant good night, team members. A pleasant good night, my lecturer, Mr. Ferron. I introduce to you my team, your classmates. Our team members are myself, Sandra Davis Wallner, Miss Alicia Davis, Miss Shauna K. Anderson, and Mistress Blair Mace, and last but not least, Mistress Denise Barrows. Give it up for them. Thank you. They are our team members. And tonight, our topic is test construction. Stay tuned. Thank you for having us.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tanisha Barros Gale, and I will be presenting on the history and development and administration of sentence blank. The Rota Incomplete Sentence Blank is a projective psychological test developed by Jelaine Rota and Janet E. Ratchford in 1950. It comes in 3 forms for a different age group and comprises 40 incomplete sentences which the S has to complete as soon as possible, but the usual time taken is around 20 minutes. The responses are usually only 1 to 2 words long, such as I regret or mostly girls. The test can be administered both individually and in a group settings. It doesn't have long settings of instruction and can be easily worked out on the greater population. I'll now move on to the development. The incomplete sentence blank consists of 40 items derived from a form used by Rota and Weilerman in the Army. The form is in turn a revision of blank used by Short, Hunt, and Hosbert at the Mason General Hospital. In the development of the incomplete sentence blank, 2 objectives were kept in mind. One aim was to provide a technique which could be used objectively for screening and experimental purposes. It was felt that the technique should have at least some of the advantages of project methods and also the economical from the point of view of administration and scoring. A second goal was to obtain information of rather specific diagnostic values for treatment purposes. The incomplete sentence blank can be used, of course, for general interpretation with a variety of subjects in much the same manner that a clinical trained in dynamic psychology uses any project material. However, a feature of incomplete sentence blank is that one can derive a single overall adjustment score. This overall adjustment score is of particular value for screening purpose and college students and in experimental studies. The incomplete sentence blank has also been used in a vocational guidance center to select students require broader counseling than was usually given in experimental studies of the effective of psychotherapy and investigation of the relationship of adjustment to a variety of variables. I'll now look at the advantages. The advantages is freedom of response. That is, the subject is not forced to answer yes or no or to the examiner question. He may instead in any way he desire. Some disguise in the purpose of the test is present. Although the subject may made aware of general intent, what constitutes a good or bad answer is not readily appear to most subjects. Group administration is relatively efficient. Most incomplete sentences tests can be given to a group of any size without apparent loss or validity. No special training is ordinarily necessary for administration. Interpretation depends on the examiner's general clinical experience. Although the examiner does not need specific training in the use of the method is extremely flexible in that new sentence. Beginning can be constructed or tailored made for a variety of clinical, applied, and experimental purpose. The disadvantages: although susceptible to the semi-objective scoring, it cannot be machine score or require general skill and knowledge of personality analysis for clinical appraisal and interpretation. There is not as much disguise of purpose as in other projective method. Consequently, a sophisticated subject may be able to keep the examiners from knowing what he does not wish to reveal. Insufficient material is obtained in some cases, particularly for illiterate, disturbed, or uncooperative subjects. Application of the method as a group test also require writing and language skill and has not yet been adequately evaluated for potential clinical usefulness for young children. Thank you for listening. I'll now hand over to the next presenter.
Good night, everyone. I will be doing the purpose and the use of sentence block. The rotor incomplete sentence block is the most frequently used sentence completion test of personality and socio-emotional functioning. The test is used to screen for adjustment problems, to facilitate case conceptualization and diagnosis, and to monitor treatment in adolescents and adults. Its purpose was to efficiently gather clinical important data regarding patient psychosocial functioning in advance of the initial diagnostic interview. Reliability and validity of the sentence block. The incomplete sentence was validated involving large samples of combat veterans recovering in Army Force Hospital at the end of World War II. Overall adjustment scores correlated significantly with psychologists' ratings of patient psychosocial adjustment. Following diagnostic interview, validity is supported by correlation with other measures of psychological distress, peer, and clinical ratings of functioning.
Pleasant good night, class, fellow teammates, lecturer. I am Sandra Davis, and I will be speaking on test construction and its contents, also the samples. Test construction refers to the science and art of planning, preparing, administering, scoring, statistically analyzing, and reporting results of tests. This article emphasizes a systematic process used to develop tests in order to maximize validity, evidence, or scores resulting from these tests. The contents, what they are: multiple choice questions, true and false statements, short questions and answers, essay writing. One thing, make sure there is only one correct answer. Yes, I said one correct answer. Unless you are instructing students to select more than one, make sure the contents, the correct answer is not given away by its being noticeable, shorter, longer, or more complex than the distractors. Make the wording in the response choices consistent with the item or the STEM, otherwise the STEM. The importance of test construction: to assess, achieve of learning outcomes for the unit and or course, measure important concepts and their relationship to that unit and or course, align with your teaching and learning activities and the emphasis placed on concepts and tasks. Measure the appropriate level of knowledge. Yes, I said to measure the appropriate knowledge. Test, the purposes of test construction. Test development, or should I say the steps that are involved in test construction. Step 1, planning for the test. In all you do, you must plan. Preparing the preliminary draft of the test. Yes, trying out the preliminary draft of the test to ensure that all goes well. Yes, anything you do, you must try it out to ensure that what you are delivering to people is well done. Yes, evaluating the test. In all that you do, you must evaluate. Yes, construction of the final draft of the test. So, examples. Sheldon developed a highly controversial theory of personality based on body type and temperament of the individual. So they want to know, they want to ask, they want to test, which of the following is exorcism of Sheldon's work, right? So they will give you like 4 questions to choose from to see which one is flowing as a criticism for Sheldon. And so I'll go further. You have blank sentences, because the test construction is coming from the blank sentences or sentence block, whatever you want to call it. So these blank sentences is like filling the missing word or filling the missing spaces. So for instance, John dash to school dash. So you can put, and they would give you a list of words. So it's to fill in the sentence blank. That's basically what it is. Testing your ability on what you can do. So I close with this for now, and I will hand over to my either to my lecturer or to my colleague. Thank you for listening. Let me see if we run it again. Miss Earth soon.
As with everything else, there are advantages and disadvantages, right? So the Rotter incomplete sentence blank, one of the advantages are that questions are open-ended, and therefore the respondent has freedom of how him or her wants to respond to any specific question, right? Another thing is that although the person taking the test is made aware of its general intent, the administrator can disguise the real purpose of the test. Another advantage is that it is easily administered, and the person administering that test, they don't have to be trained, but it would be very important that that person have some kind of clinical experiences, especially if it's in a clinical setting, right? So they have to have a bit of knowledge, not necessarily training, but they have to have a bit of knowledge, right? And of course, it can be used in education, it can be used in a clinical setting, clinical interventions, right? Yeah, so it's kind of flexible, right? Another thing is that in terms of flexibility, you can always change the questions, like the construct of the beginning of the questions. You can always change it, right? For, as I say, a variety of clinical or experimental purposes, right? So those are the advantages. Some of the disadvantages is that although it is susceptible to semi-objective scoring, it has to be manually scored, right? Which requires general skill and knowledge of personality analysis for clinical appraisal and intervention. So, it's kind of time consuming. Another disadvantage is that there is not much disguise of the purpose as in other projected methods. Therefore, the screener is able to respond in any way that may prevent the examiner from knowing what they don't want them to know, right? So they can basically lie on the on that questionnaire. Another one is that insufficient material may be obtained in some cases, especially in the case where the screener is illiterate, disturbed, or uncooperative, as this method requires writing and language skills, right? Another disadvantage is that the test may introduce bias, as I said before, untruth, right? Answers which are more sociable, accepted, right? And not give a true reflection of how the person is feeling or their behaviors, because they're actually giving you, the examiner, an answer that they think you want to hear, right? Another one is that enough time is not allotted to do that test, right? The time is short. And especially if the person is not, they may be literate, but not to a point where, you can go through question and answers within the specified time that is allotted, right? In terms of scoring, every sentence can be placed in 3 categories, right? If you are doing a personality trait thing, like for example, sociability, how well the person is sociable, how much self-confidence they have, and their ambition, right? And the test is scored on a 7-point basis, from 7-point scale, from 0 to 6. And the higher the score, the higher degree of maladaptation. And all these marks are allotted, should be added to each trait, and then get a total score for the test, right? There are different phases of this test. I don't know if I should use the word phases, but when, in terms of the answers for the questions, you can look at in 3 different ways. One as positive. The answers can be positive, which shows positive aspects of the person's trait, which indicate healthy or helpful frame of mind and hopeful attitude, right? And when you score these positive indications, you give it 2 points on that scale. For a negative, every one that is considered negative, a negative response, it is allotted 1 mark, and the negative responses show the negative aspect of the person's trait, and these responses are considered undesirable or maladapted, indicating hostility or unhappiness, misery, and self-destructive wishes, right? And then you have the neutral. The scale is neutral on the scale, where this shows neither positive nor negative aspect, and so these are not allotted any number on the scale, right? Where there's no response, or a response is too short to be meaningful, they are omitted, right? Therefore, screeners are encouraged not to skip any questions. And where there are more than 20 exclusions, that means you miss some of the questions, the paper is thought to be unscrambled. That means it is rendered useless.
Hello, good night. My name is Elisa Davis, and tonight I'll be presenting on the norm, standardization, including psychometric properties, evaluation of the test, including its relevancy in the Caribbean. Rotor Incomplete Sentence Blank Norm is a psychological development test that came about by Gillian Rotor in the 1950s. It's comprised of 4 sections: children, adolescent, students, and adult. It normally consists of 40 sentences and is administered over a timeline of 20 to 40 minutes. This version has high inter-rater reliability and moderate internal consistency. They also have a diagnostic validity and test score. It discriminates between persons known to be well-adjusted or poorly adjusted. Standardization. Standardization is very important in personal testing. It is having the same personality test issued to everybody and expect the same or similar answers. With a standardization test, you cannot give some persons a set of tests and another a different set. The test would not be fair, it would be unfair, it would not be standard. The test must be fair and equal for everybody. For example, with the JTS students and management class, the administrator of JTS cannot administrate a test to Portmore Community College and administrate another management test to the Old Harbour campus. That would be fair. It would be equal because, as it says, you're expected same or similar answers. And if they administrate two different tests, they will get two different answers. That would not be fair and it would not be standard. Psychometric properties. Psychometric properties is broken down into two parts: reliability and validity. Reliability is a psychological test that, when given, most produce the same result and a consistent condition, while on the other hand, validity test measures the accuracy of the test. It must not have any personal bias. It must have accuracy for the scoring and the interpretation. Rotor incomplete sentence blank is a personality test that strives to measure psychological overall adjustment for students, adults, and individuals, such as higher education, medical, clinical, industrial, and research setting. It provides the tester with the knowledge to evaluate the individual and groups properly. Rotor incomplete sentence blank is a personality and socio-emotional functioning to test the performance of individual and groups. This type of test is used for screening for adjustment problem, to facilitate case conceptualization and diagnosis, plus monitor treatment. Because of the extent of rotor incomplete sentence blank testing, it is important for the Caribbean population. It identifies areas of psychosocial conflict among the population. A qualitative method is used to collect data for interpretation. Rotor incomplete sentence blank information is very useful as a complement to others or adjustive component of psychological assessment to obtain a description of the individual and its group. As for the Caribbean, it is very vital to do the rotor incomplete sentence blank because it gives you a knowledge of the level you're on, what you can do to assess yourself.
Okay, we have now come to the end of our presentation on sentence blank. I hope that whatever we have presented was very informative and you learn a lot from it. If there are any question you want to ask, you can ask now. If not, I'll now hand over the class to the next segment.